How's it going, my sweet bakers? Hope you're having a great day. Welcome back to the channel. Today I have something extra soft and fluffy for you, so let's get to the kitchen and check it out. You can find a few cinnamon roll recipes on my channel. There's nothing wrong with them, they're perfectly fine. But in my quest for ultimate softness, I might have just hit peak cinnamon roll. Using the Yudane method makes your bread extra soft and fluffy. I mean, just look at that squishy goodness. Also, Yudane makes your bread stay softer for longer. Not that they will last very long before being eaten, because ultra soft cinnamon rolls topped with a cream cheese frosting are absolutely irresistible. They just go down so easily. You'll be munching them one after the other, so let's get right to it and see what we need to make them. For the dough, we'll need some white bread flour, water, an egg yolk, yeast, salt, softened butter, and sugar. The egg yolk, the sugar, and the butter will also contribute to the softness of this dough. And we will use the leftover egg white for glazing the rolls before baking them. For the filling, we'll need some sugar, cinnamon, and softened butter. There are a couple of ways of doing this. You can spread the butter on the dough and then sprinkle it with cinnamon sugar, like I'm going to do. Or you can mix all three ingredients to a paste and use them that way. But that does make it thicker and harder to apply. Right, onto the frosting, we'll need some icing sugar, full fat cream cheese, vanilla paste or vanilla syrup, some softened butter, and a couple grams of water. The water is there for adjusting consistency, which I didn't need to at the end. Okay, equipment. We'll need a tray with some non-stick paper, a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, a brush, and a rolling pin. Let's get the frosting out of the way first, since all the ingredients are already weighed out. In a large bowl, combine the cream cheese, the softened butter, and the vanilla syrup, and then mix until smooth. Once you have mixed it up nicely, add the icing sugar, and then continue mixing until smooth again. If the mix feels too stiff and dry after you finish mixing the icing sugar in, then you can add a couple of grams of water to adjust the consistency, make it looser. The consistency of my frosting was just right, so I didn't have to do it. You want it to be quite thick so it doesn't slide off the rolls. Right after mixing, transfer it to a small bowl, cover it up and refrigerate it until needed. You can make this a whole day ahead of time if you want to. Okay, so that's how you make the frosting. Let's move on to the Yudane. All we are doing here is mixing part of the flour and part of the water of this recipe, but the water must be boiling. Yudane, also known as a scald, is a method used for gelatinizing starch in the flour. We are essentially cooking the starch, and this is what gives the dough the super soft and fluffy texture. You want to leave this to cool down completely, and even refrigerate it if your kitchen is hot. Using a cold scald, or cold Yudane, is a great way for controlling the final dough temperature. That's what I did here. My kitchen was quite warm, so I cooled the Yudane down. If you want to see a detailed video about scalding, and detailed video about temperature control, you'll find those in the Principles of Baking playlist. Let's move on to making our dough. In a large bowl, combine the water, yeast, salt, sugar, and the egg yolk. Give it all a good mix. You want to dissolve the salt and sugar completely and hydrate the yeast. Next up, add the Yudane and the remaining flour. We're not adding the butter yet. That'll come a little bit later. When it comes to a recipe like this, which contains sugar, eggs, and also the Yudane, it's best not to add the butter from the get-go. Adding it too soon would make the dough extremely difficult to knead, and it would take longer. So this is what we're going to do instead. First, mix your dough in the bowl until there's no more dry flour. Then tip it out on the table and start kneading it using the regular kneading method. What I like to do is press down and forwards with the heel of my right hand, then use the fingers of my left hand to fold the piece of dough under the heel of my right hand, and then turn it and repeat. Keep kneading the dough just like this for 3 minutes, and it will already become nice and strong. Now's the time to add the butter. Stretch the dough out, place it down on the table, and place the softened butter right into the middle of it. Then fold the dough around the butter, sealing it in. And what follows isn't pretty, but it's the only way. You want to pick the dough up and squish it together. You want to force the butter into the dough. It will be messy at first, but don't worry, it'll all make sense in a minute. Press it together until it's more or less combined. Then scrape it all up. We're going to start kneading it using the slap and fold kneading method, because at the moment the dough is very loose. Pick the dough up by one side, turn it towards yourself, then stretch it against the table and fold it over forwards. So always slap it against the table, pull it towards yourself and fold it over forwards. That's why it's called slap and fold. Once it turns back into a nice cohesive piece, you can switch back to the normal kneading method. The dough should be kneaded for 6 minutes after the addition of butter. And once the time's up, it should look like this. It's beautifully smooth, it's not sticky, and it's nice and cohesive. Now we can pop it into the bowl and take its temperature. Around 25 to 26 degrees Celsius is just about right for this. That's 77 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Now let's cover it up, leave it to ferment for 1 hour. This dough contains a lot of fat, so it's quite loose and stretchy. And that's why halfway through bulk fermentation, we'll give it a fold, just to build some tension. This will help our cinnamon rolls keep their shape. So pop the dough out on the table with the smooth side down. Then fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until you have a nice tight ball. Then flip it smooth side up again, tighten it against the table, and it can go back into the bowl for 1 more hour of fermentation. And during this time, it should really start puffing up. If yours isn't, just keep it for longer. Mine is almost doubled in size, so it's ready. Now dust the table generously with flour. Drop the dough out of the bowl and dust the dough as well. Before we move on to the rolling pin, first start pressing the dough out by hand. We just want to flatten it out a bit to make it easier to roll. And just look at that texture. It is so incredibly soft, it's unbelievable. I almost feel bad for flattening it like this, but it has to be done. Now let's move on to the rolling pin. Roll it out to a nice big rectangle. You can make it thicker or thinner, it's totally up to you. If you want to make many small rolls, you can make it bigger. If you're making 6 chunky rolls, we'll make it smaller. Once you're happy with the size, grab the butter and brush it evenly all over the dough. Just leave a gap at the very top. Next up, cover it evenly with the cinnamon sugar. Again, leaving a gap at the top. You can flavor your sugar with different spices, maybe some cloves, cardamom or ginger even. After sprinkling on the sugar, press it into the butter. Let the butter absorb the sugar. As you can see, I ended up doing it in batches. I sprinkled the sugar once, I pressed it in, then I did it once more. Brush the exposed piece of dough at the top with a little bit of water. Let's call it a temporary fastening solution. We want the dough to stick when we cut our rolls, but we will unstick it later, and I'll show you why. Okay, we are ready to roll. Start off by folding up a lip from the bottom, and then just repeat it over and over again. You want to roll it nice and tight, and to make it so, you always want to pull it back as you roll it. As you can see me demonstrating right now, I'm rolling the dough forwards and I'm pulling it back. Keep going until you reach the top and then seal it up. And now we are ready to cut them. There's only one thing we need to do before that. Let's clean down the mess. Okay, place the roll on the chopping board. Ideally, you want to use a serrated knife. It's the best tool for this job. I decided to trim the ends, which you don't have to do. I was just trying to get my rolls all the same size, even though they weren't in the end anyway. If you do trim them, of course, you don't want to discard the trimmings. They're totally fine. They're just like mini cinnamon rolls. If you want to make your rolls slightly smaller, you can cut your dough into 8 instead of 6 pieces. But whatever you do, before placing them on a tray, unstick the loose end of dough and tuck it underneath the roll. We're doing that for 2 reasons. First, this will prevent the loose end of dough from coming undone as it's rising and baking. And second, it will prevent the cinnamon sugar filling from leaking out. Leave some decent gaps between them because they will puff out quite a lot. Now they're ready for the final proof. We can cover them up and leave them to rise. The final proofing time will of course depend on the temperature of your kitchen. At this point my kitchen was around 24 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And the final proof took around 2 hours. You want them to puff up a lot. Make sure you preheat your oven during the final hour of fermentation. 160 degrees Celsius, fan on. And that's 320 degrees Fahrenheit for my American friends. These rolls have puffed up beautifully. Now we want to gently brush them with the egg white. This will make them nice and shiny. And I do mean gently. They are quite soft and fragile, so don't poke them with a brush. Take your time and don't rush this. Alright, let's get these bad boys in the oven. They'll take around 23 minutes. Once they are nicely puffed up and golden brown all over, they're ready. All we need from this point on is a lot of patience. These things look and smell irresistible, but we have to let them cool down completely before we put the frosting on them. Otherwise it's just gonna melt and slide off. I'll leave them to cool down for around 45 minutes. I know it's nice to bite into a warm cinnamon roll, but bread in general only tastes like it should once it's down to room temperature. Even the worst bread can taste nice when it's soft and warm, but only the best breads are good at room temperature. But just check out these cinnamon rolls. The cream cheese icing really makes it for me. The recipe makes slightly more than is needed, because this is definitely too much for one roll. I just love this stuff so much that I could eat it with a spoon. Let's cut it in half and see what's inside once again. Just look at that crumb. It is so incredibly light and airy. These are by far the softest cinnamon rolls I've ever made. And now all you need to do is make yours. So what do you think of these cinnamon rolls? What's your favorite use for the Yudane method? Let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this one, click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.